flash. So what do you keep saying to the people behind doors? Shh. We're in the presence of God. In Genesis 2, people say, I know I'm in the presence of God. All right? So, you know how Francis, where's Francis, Pope Francis getting his energy from? Little kids' schools. And he's finding it in homeless shelters. He's going to hospitals, and he's just, that's where he's finding God's kids, right? For some of us, that's a tough understanding. It's all in there. Every time you say, that is God, you can legitimately say, yes, that is God. Is it a complete understanding? Actually, I just looked at my watch. I have 5 minutes left. So I'll tell you what, rather than you talking for 5 minutes, let me see if I can just give you a little bit more insights. And right, throw some coffee pot and throw a silver amount. And check around. Right? So what are we looking for? We're looking for a complete. Because what we can't say is, that's it, that's God. We got God to the bottom. God is just so multifaceted. All those stories on the left are accurate. They are in the collection of 73 books. But so is the Genesis 2 story, but creation did it differently. And Noah, a couple of sentences further on. David didn't get to become famous by playing Goliath. He was playing the harp, or maybe the king had migraines. One prophet says, take your farm equipment, it's time to go to war. The other prophet says, take your war equipment, it's time to start raising food for the family. Leviticus, very clear, they deserve death. John then says, all right, the first one of you, who is without sin, you do it. Luke says, I was not here. I am just going to pass on to you my gospel that has been passed on to me. Moses, it was one-on-one with God. Matthew's understanding of Christmas implies that he was born in a house. Luke's understanding of Christmas, he was born in a stable, a barn, a cave. Matthew says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Luke says, blessed are the poor. And on the cross, John says, his last words, it is finished. And Jesus willingly hands over the Spirit. In Mark's Gospel, he's saying, my God, why are you forsaking me? Right? So for us Catholics, it's not an either this one's right or that one's right. Over 1,000 years, right? Yes, let the girls into the treehouse. No, don't let the girls into the treehouse. And both of them are correct. Always go with the heel with the old. And the gospel's over the letter. And Matthew, although it's probably not the first one written, it's number 1 in the list. Give you an example. Well, actually, no. Because I want to make some comments about the New Testament. We could have talked about their understanding of law and commandments, but this comes to us. Over many generations. My mom died in the 99th year. As the kids got older, they stopped going with Dad out to California to visit Mom. But one of the last births, only the youngest one went. Amanda had a chance to talk to Grandma about the stories. Only Amanda now has some stories about Grandma in Ireland, on the boat, Chicago, being Grandpa, Dad when he was my age, all right? It's an oral tradition that Mom always resisted writing things down. Well, this comes to us from an oral tradition, right? First thing, and here's just an example. The first audience is, I was in the desert. Okay, nobody's writing things down when they're in the desert. They pass on to their kids. Grandpa, tell us the time when you were in the desert. And then, literally, for hundreds of years, this is an oral tradition. They are passing it down. Eventually, people start to write things down. Remember we talked about Babylon? Eventually, people start to write things down. It's their understanding of what is God saying to us this day. Then, when you put any one book in the collection with all the other 72 books, people start to say, wait a minute, that line here is also found here. There's a newer meaning to it. Once you put it into the collection, the Bible, then you start to get newer insights. Well, It is, therefore, no one Catholic can say, speaking for Catholics, this is what it means. All right? But we do have some people who say, I can tell you what those lines mean for us as a community, but at the same time, you and I can go home tonight and say, I think when I read those stories of Exodus, I'm enslaved in for instance, high school. I'll go back there. I'm enslaved in a bad relationship. I'm enslaved with my cigarettes. I'm enslaved with my pornography. I'm enslaved. This is a lie to that high school kid. Slavery, as it was 3,200 years ago to those people, right? It is still speaking to the people. So, this is why we say you can't, every time, when Catholics have a Sunday Mass, we're always going to read from our ancestors, right? In the Old Testament. Chapters were added when people, literally 1,300 years after Jesus died, somebody came up with the idea. Came up with the idea of putting chapters. And then a couple hundred years later, somebody else said chapters are very helpful. Now we know exactly where we want to go. They'd be even more helpful if we could make it more specific, and then we've got verses. So when we read a letter from Paul, okay, there's no chapters and verses. I'm just writing a letter to you, right? And at times when they put chapters and verses, it's a little awkward, but hope that helps. So how do we get this to be it? I'm going to give you one slide, and then you say, well, that's our hour, and that's. Or we could stay here until we learn out. We'll stay here until we learn everything about the Bible. All in favor? Aye. Henotheism means there's lots of gods out there. But our ancestors saying, yeah, but you know what? We're starting to think that there's one God, Yahweh, is better than all the rest. They're not denying that there's other gods. This is like 4,000 years ago, right? They grew up polytheists, many gods. Abram takes a step to, yeah, but of all the gods, there's only one. By the time we get to Moses, people are starting to say, there is no other God. That's just a piece of stone. That's just a mountain. There is no God there. Until eventually we get down to where we are now, mono, just one God, and he makes covenants with people. He says everybody's involved. For instance, when we saw the Pope the other day at Ground Zero, who else was at Ground Zero with him? Buddhists were with him. Hindus were with him. Muslims are with him. All right? The Noah covenant that we found in our Testament, it's God is the God for all of them. Then he makes one specifically with just Abraham. It continues on. How can you tell a Jew? Physically looking at him? No. The law. Jews do this and Jews do not do that. We are part of the Mosaic tradition. Catholics do this and we do not do that. We've got unconditional type covenants. Anybody's ever been a parent, right? You got to answer that question. What is it that if they did this, you kick them out of the house? Or you would say, for instance, they're calling my house now with my 3 kids. It's in the airport. You know how planes land at the airport? And they stay at the airport until they've unloaded their baggage and refueled. So they're in their 20s now. And, right, one landed and took off, and one, all right? But which is the one that Jesus picked? Jeremiah. It's in your hearts. You can't look at somebody who obviously you're Catholic, you're not Catholic, you're not Catholic. It's in the heart, okay? So, last one. Let's see. Let's see. The more they looked, the more they saw. The more they saw, he came to the conclusion. He is human. He's human. But he's more than human. We started to see all kinds. And that's where I'll leave you with, right? Revelation, remember I said Revelation means to pull back? The longer they looked, and the more they went through there, they started to see more and more and more and more. And they said, how come I didn't know this when I was younger? It's going to come for every. Al, would you say that it's no more? There's a lot. I got 50 more slides. You want to?
Are they on the web somewhere where we can get them?
Seriously, there are people.